Welcome to another episode of Straight Out of Crampton. This one's called I Don't Go Looking for Trouble, It Comes Looking for Me. And I promise you, as far-fetched as this sounds, it's all true. In fact, some bits I've dumbed down a little bit because you just wouldn't believe it. It was a beautiful day and I'd left work early to walk into town along the old tram road. I used to live at the other end of it. I now live at this end of it. It's just over there. It's really nice. And that's through Avon Park in Preston. And you get into Preston town centre and it's a lovely view. You hear woodpeckers and so on. And I was going to treat myself to a hearty dinner at Wetherspoons. My plan had gone awry when a customer rang me on my mobile. I'd stopped to talk to him and I was leaning against the railings on the bridge looking at the view down the river, which, to be fair, is quite spectacular. Even though the bridge was quite crowded with people who were also making the most of the first sunny day we'd had in months, I could hear some loudmouth swearing at the top of his voice. I turned around to tell him to shut his trap as there were kids about, but I bit my tongue. As soon as I turned around, I knew things weren't right. There was a gang of them, and the foul-mouthed one was holding a black crash helmet. In the distance, I could see two yobbos with scarves covering their faces, sat on a fairly new-looking scooter. I suspected they weren't the rightful owners, and my suspicions were confirmed when I saw the lad who'd been holding the black full-face helmet throw it into the river. I cut my customer off and I dialed 999. The helmet bobbled about in the fast-flowing river and set off on its journey towards the sea, where it'd be lost forever or possibly end up keeping Tom Hanks company on a desert island. The yobbo had been holding the helmet with his thumb on the outside. He wasn't wearing gloves. There must be fingerprints on it, and I had to get it back. I tried to look like I was too engrossed in my phone call as I walked towards them, but I couldn't help eyeballing the lad who'd dispatched the helmet. He'd got a face that I would never get tired of punching. However, people like to punch my face too, possibly because it's an open book and it displays exactly what I'm thinking at any given moment. If I don't like you, I can't hide it. I had a cutting reply in the chamber ready to fire back, just in case he said, "What are you looking at?" But then I decided the gang might throw me off the bridge if I said, probably some long-term prisoner's new girlfriend. He sneered at me, then he spat on the floor. I maintained eye contact and I stared him out, determined not to blink first. If I was unable to retrieve the helmet, at least I knew where I could get a sample of the disgusting git's DNA. As I turned the corner to go down the side of the river, my view was obscured by a copse of trees. I temporarily lost sight of the helmet, and my heart sank when I couldn't see it in the river when I got round the corner. Luckily, it had gotten stuck in the rocks at the side of the river, but it was where the highest part of the embankment was, and there would be no way that I could reach it. I finally got through to the police and gave the operator instructions as to the thieves' whereabouts that even an Italian lorry driver could follow. By this time, the two yobs on the Nick scooter were making a nuisance of themselves by riding down the river as fast as they could. They were being cheered on by the rest of the gang as pedestrians were forced to jump out their way. Having been on the receiving end of more than my fair share of vandalism, thefts and criminal injustice at my place of work, and knowing you have to give Preston Police Emergency Service at least 24 hours notice if you want them to attend the scene of a crime, I decided that I couldn't rely on them. So I set off in pursuit of the yobs myself. I called the police again, impressing on the operator that if they didn't come soon, I would have to stop following the gang or risk getting beaten up if they saw me. I was just trying to make them hurry up. There was no way I would have stopped following the gang. There were about 12 of them, and even though they didn't look to have a brain cell between them, I didn't have any real cover, and they couldn't fail to notice that I'd been behind them for a good while now. They turned off the path and were heading into the trees. Annoyingly, I hadn't managed to get close enough to them to get a decent photograph so they could be identified later. I tried my best to make a mental note of heights, hair colours, clothing and approximate ages. Then I heard an explosion in the distance as the fuel tank of the motorbike ignited, and I could see smoke billowing up through the trees. They'd set fire to the scooter to destroy the evidence. I'd previously seen the charred remains of several motorcycles in Avon Park. The thieves nicked them, joyride through the park causing havoc, and then they torched them. Set fire. As this seemed to be this gang's modus operandi too, after I'd rung the fire brigade, I called the police again and told them if they hurried up, they could catch the gang that had probably been responsible for destroying thousands of pounds worth of motorbikes in the past, and they would be able to close a few unsolved cases. The bike was engulfed in flames. There was nothing I could do to extinguish them. It seemed like an age, so I heard the fire engine sirens. But even though I told the operator that the fire was on the Penwortham side of the river, they'd got it wrong. So I had to run back to get them and lead them back to the fire across the bridge and show them where the bike was. By this time there was nothing left of the bike when the firemen had tackled the blaze. The yobs had made themselves scarce and there was still no sign of the police. I'm not your normal type of guy, and I just happened to have a monocular in my pocket, which is half of a pair of binoculars basically, kind of like a tiny telescope. I've been keeping an eye on the helmet over the other side of the river through it in case it started to move, and I had to chase after it. Result, it was still trapped in the rocks. I made my way down the river, estimated its flow and how fast I'd need to run in order to get far enough in front of the helmet to position myself, lay in wait and then scoop it out of the river. Then I prepared the spot I'd chosen on the embankment. It was the lowest place I could find where I could touch the water. Unfortunately, it was also very wet and very muddy. It would have been submerged at high tide just a couple of hours ago. In case the helmet went by out of arm's length, I looked around and found the biggest branch I could. If it was further away than I could reach with the branch, then I'd resign myself to the fact that I was going to be getting wet. One way or another, I would be retrieving that helmet. Armed with a load of smaller branches, I went back to set about dislodging the helmet. The second branch thrown at full force hit it. Off it went, and so did I. Running flat out, I watched as the current took it away from the embankment. I grabbed the branch, I lay flat on the floor and held it out just above the water. The helmet was almost out of reach and I was at full stretch. I wouldn't be able to hook it, so I held the branch out at an angle, letting the force of the river drive the helmet down the branch and towards me. I would need to let go of the branch and make a grab for the helmet. I'd get one chance before the current took it away again. I got it, but I nearly toppled in doing so. I was a bit knackered from my sprint down the river, so I rolled over, put the helmet on my chest and tried to get my breath back. Just then, I heard a lady with an American accent shout, "Oh my God, are you all right?" She was talking to me. She'd seen me lying on the floor, covered in mud, holding a motorcycle and helmet, and had assumed that I'd swerved to avoid the bright red fire engine that was parked on the path, crashed into the river, and had just dragged my sorry arse out. She asked if she could help me or telephone someone to come and get me. She was beautifully dressed, very pretty, nice eyes, well-spoken, and female. Just my type. For reasons best known unto herself, my long-term girlfriend had just fallen out with me again, and I briefly considered giving the American girl my number to dial, answering it when it rang, and saying, "How you doing?" The chat-up line that seemed to work so well for Joey or friends.
How you doing?
I thought that would be a pretty good icebreaker. But then I decided against it, as she seemed really nice, and it would be cruel to inflict a relationship with me on her when she was only trying to help. It would also take too long to explain what had actually happened to, and to convince her that I wasn't actually an accident-prone half-wit, and I'd just managed to salvage some vital evidence that would be the undoing of a gang of local motorbike thieves. So I let her get on her way, blissfully unaware of what a close escape she'd had. And at least she'd have a great anecdote to tell her mates when she got back to the US. I went to wait for the police. I waited an hour and a half, but they were a no-show again. I left a helmet, my name, address and telephone number with the firemen, and I told them not to touch anything as there were fingerprints on vital evidence. And the next afternoon I got a call from the cops. I wasn't in the mood to be civil. In my CCTV videos of the vandalism that was done at my pitch, you could clearly see people driving past. I didn't expect people to put themselves in danger and try to apprehend the vandals, but the least they could have done was call the police. Perhaps they too would have been left feeling like they'd wasted the time, like I'd done. I told the officer what I thought, and then he made some ludicrous excuse about being sent to the wrong place. Then he made the situation even worse by telling me they won't be able to get a fingerprint off the helmet as it had been in the water. I told him that there was a clear thumbprint on the helmet and it could be seen with the naked eye, and if their forensic department couldn't get it, he could send it back to me and I'd do it with my iPhone, some plastic and a tube of superglue. Scenes of crime department usually dust for fingerprints using aluminium powder, but I discovered my fingerprint technique by accident when a colleague had been asked by a customer to put new fancy dials on the speedometer in her MX-5. He used superglue to secure the new dials and reassembled the instrument binnacle. The next day, a very unhappy customer brought the car back. Superglue causes a chemical reaction with plastic and produces fumes which stick to the oils left behind by the friction ridges on your fingers when you touch something. She couldn't see how fast she was going as the speedometer and everything he'd touched in the instrument cluster was just one mass of white fingerprints. It's a good job he hadn't been clocking the car. That's winding the mileage back, because even Preston Police would have caught him. I assume he gave Preston Police Forensics Department my message and they decided to use my method and had gone out and bought some super glue and a piece of plastic. 8 months later, I got a call from the police saying they'd got the fingerprints back off the helmet and they'd arrested the suspect, and they asked if I'd come down to the station to identify the guy. I readily agreed, and the officer said he would call me back the next day to make the necessary arrangements. That was about 15 years ago, and I'm still waiting for his call. I assume that the guy decided to plead guilty, so they didn't need me after all, and couldn't be asked to ring me and let me know. A simple thank you from the police officer or the owner of the scooter would have been nice, but seeing as I got neither, I would just like to say, it's all in a day's work for a car dealer, and you're welcome. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.